Ukraine just crossed a line. Now Russia may unleash a night strike on Oreshnik. Massive retaliation incoming? Oreshnik could be ground zero tonight. Breaking, Ukraine's boldest attack yet. Putin's revenge could hit Oreshnik. Is Oreshnik the next Mariupol? Ukraine fears nightfall could bring ballistic chaos. Tensions skyrocket. Russia prepares devastating response after Ukraine's biggest strike. Eyes on Oreshnik. Military sources warn of incoming ballistic missiles tonight. Ukraine hits hard. But is Oreshnik about to pay the price? Midnight missile threat. Oreshnik braces for what could be Russia's deadliest move yet. No warning, no mercy. Could Russia's strike on Oreshnik ignite a global crisis? Putin's red line crossed. Oreshnik on high alert after. Ukraine's shocking assault. Ukraine's biggest attack yet. Is Russia about to hit back hard in Oreshnik? In a dramatic escalation of the Ukraine-Russia war, Ukraine has launched its most powerful offensive yet, targeting key Russian positions in a move that's shocked global observers. Now, with Oreshnik on high alert, reports suggest that Russia may retaliate with a devastating ballistic missile strike under the cover of night. Will Oreshnik be the next flashpoint in this dangerous conflict? How will Vladimir Putin's military respond to Ukraine's largest offensive of 2024? What does this mean for the future of the Eastern European battlefield? Join us for this breaking update and analysis on the intensifying Russia-Ukraine conflict, the possible retaliation on Oreshnik, and what global leaders are saying behind closed doors. Introduction. Will Oreshnik be the next flashpoint? The Ukraine-Russia conflict, which began with Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and escalated with a full-scale invasion in February 2022, has entered a pivotal phase in 2025. Ukraine's largest offensive of 2024, launched in late fall, has reshaped the battlefield, leveraging advanced Western-supplied weaponry to strike deep into Russian-held territories and even Russian border regions. This bold move has heightened tensions, with speculation mounting that Russia may retaliate using its Oreshnik hypersonic missile, a weapon touted for its speed, precision, and destructive power. Posts on X, such as those from @Ivan_8848 on June 2, 2025, and @Zlati_71 on November 28, 2024, highlight the growing concern that Oreshnik could be deployed against key Ukrainian targets, potentially marking a new flashpoint in the war. The stakes are enormous. Ukraine's offensive has tested Russia's resolve, while Moscow's potential use of Oreshnik signals a willingness to escalate in response to perceived provocations. This raises critical questions. Will Russia deploy Oreshnik to reassert dominance? How will Ukraine and its NATO backers respond? And could this escalation spiral into a broader conflict with global implications? The answers depend on a complex interplay of military strategy, political calculations, and international diplomacy. This article delves into the details of Ukraine's offensive, Russia's possible counterstrike, the risks of escalation, global reactions, and the war's future trajectory, providing a comprehensive analysis of this volatile moment. Ukraine's major attack details. In late 2024, Ukraine executed its most ambitious offensive of the year, targeting Russian military infrastructure across multiple fronts. Described as a game-changer by Ukrainian officials, the operation aimed to disrupt Russia's logistical and operational capabilities, which had gained momentum in eastern Ukraine, particularly in Donbass. According to a post by @Ivan_8848 on June 2, 2025, the offensive involved U.S.-supplied Army tactical missile systems, ATACMS, UK-supplied Storm Shadow missiles, and a fleet of drones, marking a significant escalation in Ukraine's use of Western-supplied weaponry, scope, and execution. The offensive was meticulously planned, targeting a range of high-value Russian assets. Airfields and command centers. Ukrainian strikes hit Russian air bases, including those in occupied territories, damaging aircraft and disrupting air operations. A post by @WarMonitor3 on November 25, 2024, noted the destruction of a Russian command post in Luhansk. Ammunition depots. Multiple storage facilities were targeted, leading to significant explosions and supply chain disruptions. Videos circulating on X showed massive fireballs, though exact locations were often unverified. Cross-border strikes. For the first time, Ukraine used Western-supplied missiles to strike targets inside Russia, including border regions like Kursk and Belgorod. This was confirmed by Russian officials, who labeled the attacks reckless and vowed retaliation. Ground operations. Ukrainian forces conducted coordinated ground assaults in Donetsk and Zaporizhia, aiming to reclaim territory and pin down Russian troops. Western involvement. The offensive underscored Ukraine's growing reliance on NATO support. The US and UK provided not only weapons but also intelligence and satellite data to enhance targeting accuracy. A post by @Cheburikiman on November 24, 2024, suggested that US advisors were closely involved in planning, though no official confirmation exists. The use of ATACMS, with a range of up to 300 kilometers, allowed Ukraine to hit deep behind Russian lines, a capability previously restricted by Western hesitancy to avoid provoking Moscow. Impact in Russian response: the offensive inflicted significant damage, with Russian sources admitting losses of equipment and personnel, though exact figures vary widely. Ukrainian estimates claim hundreds of Russian troops were killed or wounded, alongside the destruction of dozens of vehicles and aircraft. However, Russia's Ministry of Defense downplayed the impact, calling the strikes ineffective, while acknowledging damage to civilian infrastructure in border areas. The offensive has shifted the narrative, with Ukraine demonstrating its ability to conduct complex, long-range operations, but it has also strained its resources, as ammunition and manpower remain limited. Russia's next target, Oreshnik? The Oreshnik missile, an intermediate-range hypersonic ballistic missile, has emerged as Russia's potential weapon of choice for retaliation. Introduced in late 2024, Oreshnik is designed to travel at speeds exceeding Mach 5, making it nearly impossible to intercept with current air defense systems. Russian President Vladimir Putin, in a November 2024 address cited by @Zlati_71 on November 28, 2024, described Oreshnik as a game-changer capable of delivering strikes with nuclear-like devastation when used in salvos. Its combat testing, including a reported strike on Ukrainian military facility in November 2024, has fueled speculation about its role in Russia's response. Strategic rationale: Russia's consideration of Oreshnik is driven by several factors. Deterrence. A post by @InsiderGeo on June 1, 2025, argues that deploying Oreshnik would signal to Ukraine and NATO that Russia can respond decisively to cross-border attacks. This aligns with Moscow's broader strategy of deterring further Western escalation. Psychological impact. The missile's hypersonic capabilities and Putin's rhetoric amplify its psychological effect, aiming to intimidate Ukraine and its allies. A post by @Captain Kyle Patriot on June 2, 2025, highlighted Russian media emphasizing Oreshnik's unstoppable nature. Tactical advantage. Oreshnik's ability to penetrate air defenses makes it ideal for targeting fortified Ukrainian positions or Western-supplied equipment, such as Patriot systems or HIMARS launchers. Potential targets. While no official Russian statement has confirmed specific targets, speculation on X points to several possibilities. Kiev. A post by @Zlati_71 on November 29, 2024, suggested Russia might strike military or governmental targets in Kiev to punish Ukraine's leadership. Russian forces have reportedly increased reconnaissance and air defense activity around the capital. Western Ukraine, Lviv and other western cities, used as hubs for NATO-supplied weapons, are potential targets. A strike here would disrupt Ukraine's supply lines but risk escalating tensions with NATO. Frontline infrastructure. Russian military bloggers, such as those cited by @WarMonitor3, propose targeting Ukrainian command centers or airfields in Donbass to weaken the offensive's momentum. Challenges and constraints. Deploying Oreshnik is not without risks for Russia. The missile, while advanced, is believed to be in limited supply, as Russia's production capacity for hypersonic weapons is constrained. A large-scale strike could deplete reserves, leaving Russia vulnerable to further Ukrainian attacks. Additionally, targeting civilian areas risks international backlash, as seen in previous Russian strikes on Ukrainian cities. Analysts on X, including @J_D007 on November 26, 2024, note that Russia may opt for a limited, symbolic strike to balance impact and restraint. Expert analysis. Military escalation risks. The potential use of Oreshnik introduces significant risks of escalation, with implications for both regional and global security. Military experts, including those cited in web analyses from Reuters and BBC, highlight the following concerns. Crossing the nuclear threshold. While Oreshnik is a conventional weapon, its destructive power, capable of leveling large facilities, has drawn comparisons to low-yield nuclear strikes. Putin's November 2024 statement, referenced by @Zlati_71, emphasized this capability, raising fears of a blurred line between conventional and nuclear conflict. A post by @Captain Kyle Patriot on June 2, 2025, mentioned unverified reports of Russia placing its nuclear forces on high alert, though no official confirmation supports this claim. Any misinterpretation of Oreshnik's use as a nuclear escalation could prompt a disproportionate response from NATO or Ukraine. NATO's red lines. Ukraine's use of Western-supplied weapons on Russian soil has already tested NATO's boundaries. A Russian strike with Oreshnik targeting NATO-supplied assets, such as a warehouse storing atoms, could be interpreted as an attack on the alliance itself. This risks invoking NATO's Article 5, which considers an attack on one member an attack on all. Analysts warn that even a limited strike could escalate if NATO perceives it as a direct challenge. A post by @Cheburykyman on November 24, 2024, noted NATO's concern over Oreshnik's range, which could theoretically reach European capitals. Civilian and humanitarian risks. A strike on Kiev or other urban centers would likely cause significant civilian casualties, given Oreshnik's destructive power. Previous Russian strikes on Ukrainian cities, such as the 2022 Mariupol siege, drew widespread condemnation and bolstered international support for Ukraine. A similar outcome could galvanize NATO and EU resolve, potentially leading to increased military aid or economic sanctions. Humanitarian organizations, cited in web reports from the UN, warn that further escalation could exacerbate Ukraine's already dire humanitarian crisis, with millions displaced and infrastructure in ruins. Russia's strategic dilemma. Russia faces a delicate balancing act. A restrained response risks appearing weak, potentially emboldening Ukraine and its allies. Conversely, a large-scale Oreshnik strike could isolate Russia further, alienating neutral countries like China and India, which have called for de-escalation. The economic cost of escalation, including potential new sanctions, adds another layer of complexity, as Russia's economy is already strained by existing measures. Global reactions and NATO's position. The international response to Ukraine's offensive and the looming threat of a Russian Oreshnik strike has been marked by caution, condemnation, and diplomatic maneuvering. Key stakeholders have reacted as follows. United States. The U.S. has reaffirmed its commitment to Ukraine, providing billions in military aid, including the atoms used in the 2024 offensive. However, the Biden administration has emphasized avoiding direct confrontation with Russia. A web report from CNN on June 1, 2025, noted U.S. calls for restraint, with officials urging Ukraine to limit strikes on Russian territory to avoid provoking a severe response. Domestic political pressures in the U.S., particularly with the 2024 election cycle concluded, complicate the response, as public support for Ukraine aid wanes. European Union. The EU is divided. Western European nations like France and Germany advocate for diplomacy, pushing for renewed ceasefire talks through platforms like the OSCE. Eastern European countries, including Poland and the Baltic states, demand stronger military support for Ukraine, citing the threat of Russian aggression spilling over. A post by @J_D007 on November 26, 2024, highlighted Poland's deployment of additional troops to its border, reflecting regional anxieties. The EU has also increased sanctions on Russian energy and financial sectors, though enforcement varies. China and the Global South. China has maintained neutrality, calling for dialogue and warning against actions that could destabilize global markets. A web statement from China's Foreign Ministry on June 2, 2025, emphasized peaceful resolution, but avoided direct criticism of either side. Countries like India, Brazil, and South Africa, part of the Global South, expressed concern over the conflict's economic fallout, particularly rising energy and food prices. These nations are reluctant to align fully with Western sanctions, prioritizing their own economic stability. NATO's stance. NATO's position is delicate. The alliance has condemned Ukraine's strikes on Russian soil as escalatory, but continues to supply defensive systems like Patriot and NASAMS. A NATO statement, cited in a Reuters article on June 1, 2025, reaffirmed support for Ukraine's right to self-defense but urged avoiding actions that could draw NATO into direct conflict. The alliance is particularly concerned about Oreshnik's capabilities, as noted by @Cheburykyman on November 24, 2024, which suggested NATO is re-evaluating its missile defense strategies in Eastern Europe. Other actors, non-state actors, including humanitarian organizations and cyber groups, are also active. The UN has called for de-escalation to protect civilians, while groups like Anonymous have targeted Russian digital infrastructure in retaliation for strikes on Ukraine. These actions, though peripheral, add complexity to the conflict's dynamics. What comes next in the Ukraine-Russia war? The future of the Ukraine-Russia conflict hinges on the interplay of military, diplomatic, and economic factors. Several scenarios are possible, each with distinct implications. Russian retaliation scenarios limited Oreshnik strike. Russia could deploy Oreshnik against a high-value military target, such as a Ukrainian airbase or command center, to demonstrate resolve without targeting civilians. This would aim to deter further Ukrainian offensives while minimizing international backlash. Broad escalation. A large-scale campaign using Oreshnik and other systems could target multiple Ukrainian cities, aiming to cripple Ukraine's military and morale. This risks severe civilian casualties and a stronger NATO response, potentially including direct intervention. Hybrid response. Russia might combine Oreshnik strikes with cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, and intensified ground operations in Donbass to maximize pressure on Ukraine without over-relying on hypersonic missiles. Ukraine's ability to sustain its offensive depends on continued Western support and its own resilience. Key factors include air defense. Ukraine's success in countering Oreshnik will depend on systems like Patriot and S-300, though these are limited in number and vulnerable to saturation attacks. Western aid. Continued supply of weapons, intelligence, and funding is critical. However, donor fatigue in the US and EU could constrain Ukraine's capabilities. Territorial goals. Ukraine may focus on consolidating gains in Donbass or launching new offensives in the south, though manpower shortages remain a challenge. Diplomatic prospects. Ceasefire talks, largely stalled since 2022, could resurface if both sides seek to avoid escalation. Turkey and the UN have offered mediation, but mutual distrust and domestic pressures, Zelensky's need to show strength and Putin's hardline stance, make progress unlikely. A post by @Insider Geo on June 1, 2025, suggested China might push for talks to stabilize global markets, though its influence over Russia is uncertain. Regional and global implications. The conflict's trajectory could reshape Eastern Europe and beyond. Spillover risk. Escalation could destabilize neighboring countries like Moldova or Belarus, where Russian influence is strong. NATO's increased presence in Poland and the Baltics raises the risk of miscalculation. Economic fallout. Continued fighting will exacerbate global energy and food crises, with Europe facing high gas prices and developing nations struggling with grain shortages. Great power dynamics. The war is a proxy for US-Russia tensions, with China's role as a wild card. A prolonged conflict could reshape global alliances, with implications for future crises. Long-term outlook. The war's resolution remains elusive. Ukraine's resilience and Western support have prevented Russian victory, but Moscow's resources and willingness to escalate suggest a protracted conflict. The introduction of advanced weapons like Oreshnik underscores the war's evolution into a high-tech, high-stakes struggle. International efforts to contain escalation, through sanctions, diplomacy, or military deterrence, will be critical to preventing a broader catastrophe.